From the darkness we strike, fast and lethal, and by the time our foes can react, darkness there, and nothing more. The founding legions of the Adeptus Astartes are characterized by their disparate and often contrasting methods of waging war. Some legions are renowned for their martial prowess, others for their expertise in siege warfare or fortification. Yet some legions, more than others, are maligned for tactics with which other Astartes might label as cowardly or dishonorable. For today, we shall be elucidating a founding legion characterized not only by its unconventional tactics, but also immense struggle and ill fortune. The 19th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, the Raven Guard. The history of the 19th Legion would be amongst the most persecuted and destitute of all the Legiones Astartes. Drawn from holy terrors subjugated techno-savages of the Xeric tribes of the Dustfields of Asiatic, the savage tribesmen would skirmish against their neighboring Indoneski bloc for resources. With the Emperor's unification of Terra, the tribes would give their firstborn sons to the Emperor's gene forges to birth the Astartes of the 19th Legion. The 19th would serve as the Emperor's hidden hand of reconnaissance, sabotage, and assassination. Conducting surgical, bloody engagements at the behest of the Master of Mankind, the 19th would quash the upstart rebellions and plots to dethrone the Emperor. Offering their foes the chance to capitulate before they would strike, the Emperor would not employ his assassins of war, alike to the 8th or savage 12th. Defeating would-be armies with only a single casualty, these shadowy sentinels of the newly born Imperium would bleed dry their enemies without revealing their forces. Their very existence kept secret until their reunion with their Primarch Corvus Corax. Shunning adulation or marks of honor, such as the laurels of victory, the 19th would nonetheless earn many victories across the Sol system. Yet during their engagement with the Xenos threat on the Jovian range of the moon of Lysithea, many of their number would perish. For 2 centuries, the 19th Legion would wage war in the name of the Imperium, until finally they would be united with their Primarch on the moon of Lycaeus, for their gene father had undergone many trials of his own. Separated from the Emperor during the scattering of the Primarchs, Corvus's gestation pod would land on the barren moon of Lycaeus. Orbiting the forge world of Kievar, the system would be ruled by the tyrannical Tech Guild overseers. Raised by the slaves of the mining workforce, the infant Primarch would be hidden from the enslavers and guards of the mining colony. Learning quickly due to his gene-forged providence, Corax would mature and develop speech, the skills to hide from his oppressors, and the ideals with which would formulate his personality. Due to his accelerated aging and maturation, the slaves of Lycaeus would idolize him as a gift to the downtrodden, naming him Deliverer and Savior in anticipation of his future deeds. The young Primarch would be tutored by his protectors and resolve to free them from their tyranny. Embodying notions of human dignity, justice, and liberty within his being, Corax would form a resistance to the tyrants of Kievar, and with time, overthrow their cruel regime. Moving unseen due to his preternatural gifts of stealth and infiltration, Corax would seize the moon of Lycaeus' weapon systems and bombard the overseer planet of Kievar with orbital atomic bombardments. At this moment, the Emperor of Mankind would arrive within the Kievar system and reunite with his long-lost gene son. Alone, the Emperor would speak with Corax for many long hours. With their audience concluded, Corvus Corax would resume his campaign against the tech guilds of Kievar. For once they had been utterly destroyed, with no assistance from the Emperor, Corax would be proven worthy and assume the mantle of Master of the 19th Legion, the soon-to-be renamed Raven Guard. With the tech guilds of Kievar capitulating and the moon of Lycaeus renamed Deliverance, the Mechanicum of Mars would rebuild the moon's infrastructure and construct a gargantuan looming tower, the Raven Spire. With the 19th Legion under his command, Corax would reorganize the methods and tactics of his legion to his liking. Purging the old customs of the Terran Xeric tribes from the Legion's ranks, Corax would revile the Legion's history of oppression and occupation. Displacing the Terran senior officers with his new Lycaean Astartes, Corax would refine and perfect his Legion's expertise of stealth and unconventional strategies. So effective were his innovations that during a Strategio Simulacra to test his Legion, Corax would defeat his brother Primarch, Roboute Guilliman, during the simulation. Though after 2 subsequent victories, Corax would never again defeat the Master of Ultramar, as he adjusted and refined his counters to his strategies. Further advancing and modifying the armaments and weapons of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the ingenuity of Corax would be shown with the introduction of the Shadowhawk gunship and Whispercutter flyer. The Kievaran guilds now serving the Raven Guard, lending their ingenuity to construct unique and tailor-made adaptations specifically to favor the 19th Legion's tactics. Kievar now aided the Imperial war effort, if not by output, but as a stalwart forge world, specializing in many peculiar contraptions. Their ties to the Legio Gryphonicus further bolstering the Raven Guard with the aid of a Titan Legion loyal to the Primarch of the 19th. Bringing worlds into compliance during the Great Crusade, it would be the Raven Guard and Corax whom would be tasked with bringing into compliance a singularly important world which would bear great significance to the future of humanity. The world of Istvan Free. Destroying Istvan Free's military unprovoked with various precision strikes, the Raven Guard would succeed in bringing the world into compliance. Despite some resistance, a delegation of Istvanians surrendered to the Raven Lord. Swearing to accept the teachings and ideals of the Imperium, the Istvanians would begin their integration with the civilian populace, left to integrate them into the fold. Dismantling the planet's religious traditions and assigning the planetary governor, Vardus Pral, to rule the world, the Raven Guard would be ignorant to the planet's destiny as the staging ground for humanity's greatest betrayal. Further aiding the newly appointed War Master, Horus Lupercal, during the compliance of the Battle of Gate 42 within the Orcam Sophis cluster. Brought to compliance originally by the Lunar Wolves, the people of the cluster had fallen to a mass psychosis of Xenos origin. The Xenos parasites would mature within the eye sockets of their victims and gain rudimentary control of their hosts with maturation. Forming a hive mind consciousness, these hosts would be dubbed the Unsighted Kings, to which Horus Lupercal would swear an oath of moment to reclaim his once compliant world. Seeking to prove himself worthy of his new title, the War Master would call to his aid the Space Wolves, Iron Warriors, and Raven Guard in their campaign against the Unsighted Kings. As Horus assigned the Raven Guard to assault the forces of Gate 42, Corax would denounce the strategy as a waste of lives and resources and propose to lead his men to carry out a series of feints to draw out their enemy. The Primarch of the Iron Warriors, Perturabo, would scoff at the plan, almost causing the two brothers to clash. Yet it would be Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, whom would prevent blood being spilled. Counseling the Raven Lord, Russ would beseech Corax to heed the words of Horus, for after all, he had been chosen by the Emperor to preside above all of his brothers as War Master. Mustering his forces, Corax would assault Gate 42, assigning most of his vanguard to comprise of the Terran-born Astartes in order to sacrifice his less favored sons. Regarded as the Raven Guard's bleakest battle in history up to this point, the 19th Legion's assault companies would be decimated. The cost of taking the gate, the lives of thousands of Raven Guard Astartes. Horus would slay the Unsighted Kings, dispelling their hold over the populace. Yet with so many lost, the Raven Guard now stood as the smallest in number of the legions at 80,000 Astartes. Removing himself from the command of the War Master, Corax would swear never to fight alongside Horus Lupercal again. Yet as a result of the culling of the Raven Guard's Terran-born Astartes, the Legion's warrior lodges would diminish, with Horus's hold of the Legion as a result, all but cleansed. As the Great Crusade waged on, the Raven Guard would be honoured with trialling a new pattern of Astartes armour, one which would not only become synonymous with the 19th Legion, but also the subsequent civil war for humanity. Due to their depleted numbers, the Raven Guard would be the obvious choice to outfit with this new armour specification. Despite the misgivings of Primarch Perturabo, the Mark VI pattern of power armour would be a resounding success. Improving upon the design, the Raven Guard would see to the mass production and approval of the Mark VI design. For their service, the design would be dubbed the Corvus pattern and be distributed amongst every Astartes Legion. Yet in many regards, this honour would be overshadowed with the armour's most significant legacy being its widespread use during the cursed Horus Heresy. Upon the world of Istvan free, Horus Lupercal would launch his scheme to overthrow the Imperium. Laying waste to his own legion's loyalist elements and those of other traitor legions, the Emperor, upon receiving the news of the betrayal, would send forth a fleet to destroy the fledgling usurper. At the spear tip, 3 loyalist legions would lead the charge: the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard. Unleashing righteous fury in the name of the Emperor, the initial assault of 3 legions would be further bolstered by the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion. As 7 legions would descend upon the traitorous and self-depleted forces of the War Master, victory would be assured. Yet as the second wave of reinforcements would make planetfall, the loyalists of the 10th, 18th and 19th Legions would be betrayed. Caught in the crossfire of 8 traitor legions, the loyalists would be massacred. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, would be slain, with Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, being captured. Their legions would be left in disarray, with only Corax remaining in command of his legion. It would not be enough to counterattack the traitors. Despite fragments of the now shattered legions escaping the Istvan system, with Corax amongst their number, all 3 legions would be utterly crippled. From 80,000 Astartes, the Raven Guard now stood at barely 3,000, beaten, jaded, and demoralized survivors. Corax would be injured during the massacre, yet salvage what Astartes he could from the bloodshed. Attempting to rapidly rebuild his legion, Corax would travel to the Sol system and commune with the Emperor, and be given knowledge of the existence of chaos and the intent of Horus's rebellion. Aiding Corax with the revelation that the genetic materials of the Primarchs resided within a secret facility within Terra's Himalayan mountains. Retrieving the genetic materials, Corax would attempt to mass recruit new initiates into the Legion with the use of the so-called Magna Mater of the Primarchs. Initially successful in developing 500 Astartes into the fold of the 19th Legion, the efforts of Corax and his apothecary, Vicente VI, would tragically be foiled with the intervention of the cunning Alpha Legion. Tampering with the materials using a demonic virus, the 2,000 aspirants transformed from such stock would become horribly mutated with horns, talons, and other maladies. Further escalating Corax's problems, the Alpha Legion had now infiltrated the Raven Guard, causing mistrust and screening to further delay his legion's renewal. With his attempts to rebuild his legion in ruins, Corax would realize his plans to replenish the Raven Guard had been a mistake. And so, after screening the Alpha Legion's infiltrators from their ranks, Corax would accept that the Legion would continue as they always had, with their slow, painstaking methods of recruitment. Yet with such resolve, Corax knew that to face the traitors, he would need to devise a new plan of action. Lacking enough firepower to face the traitors en masse, the Raven Guard would attack the supply convoys, weapons deliveries, logistical headquarters, shipping yards, and worker camps of the traitors, denying the War Master useful if not crucial supplies intended for his final assault of the Siege of Terra. The Raven Guard would continue to sabotage the traitor war effort as best they could until its resolution during the final battle between the Emperor and Horus. With the traitors repelled from Holy Terra, the Raven Guard would be reorganized into a founding chapter of the now ordained successors of the Codex Astartes. For decades, the now chapter of the Adeptus Astartes would rebuild. Undermanned and without purpose, the 19th would further hone and perfect their doctrines of war. Welcoming the decision to divide the legions of Astartes into chapters, Corax would regardless seek vengeance against the traitors, alone. After a solo year of grief-stricken penance for his actions during the Horus Heresy, locked within the Ravenspire, Corvus Corax would depart Deliverance. Disappearing from the Imperium, Corax would venture into the Eye of Terror in his quest for retribution. The last words uttered from the Primarch to his sons prior to his departure: nevermore. As the millennia have waned without the word of their Primarch's return, the Raven Guard would spend much of its time campaigning across the eastern fringe of the galaxy. Now led by their chapter master, Kayvan Shrike, the 19th's might is now split amongst the stars as several covert battalions poised to face the enemies of his Imperium. The ultimate objective of such scattered campaigns, known only to the Master of Shadows. The gene seed of the Raven Guard would be greatly diminished due to the events of the Horus Heresy. Attempting to hasten the replenishment of their broken legion, the Raven Guard's gene seed sabotage by the Alpha Legion would lead to further problems with each new generation of the Raven Guard. Drawing much of their genetic material from Holy Terror, the transformation of aspirants into the Adeptus Astartes is arguably more difficult than any other Loyalist chapter. Irrespective of the 19th's countless casualties resulting in their harsh training, those aspirants whom survive their training will receive transplanted organs with a high rate of degeneration. The vast majority of organs implanted within the Raven Guard do not function properly, with many implants, such as the mucranoid organ, which regulates their endurance of hazardous temperatures and the vacuum of space, failing to mature. As a result, the Raven Guard bear the mutation of chapter-wide pale skin pigmentation due to their melanochromic organs' inability to reliably adjust to solar radiation. Pure white in aesthetic, it matters not whereby the recruits to the chapter hail from, as all who survive their gene implantation shall become pale as wraiths with pure black hair and eyes, as is characteristic of their gene stock. Further resulting from their genetic deficiencies, the 19th also bear the so-called curse of their Primarch, the Lure of the Shadows. Reserved in demeanor, if not antisocial in their behavior, the Raven Guard are terse in their communication. As the curse progresses, 3 stages of the Astartes character shall become evident. First, the Battle Brother will become more reclusive, choosing to fight amongst only small strike teams, and shall become resistant to joint chapter operations involving direct assaults and tactics, verging on objectively disobedient refusal to follow orders. Second, the Astartes shall become ever more brooding with their dealings not only of other chapters, but also their brethren, skulking in shadows, choosing to remain silent until absolutely necessary, and manifesting an aura of unease amongst his squadron. Finally, the Raven Guard Astartes shall grow to despise even his most stalwart of battle brothers, believing his tactics and decisions outweigh the merit of his peers, even should more experienced or battle-tested Astartes' strategies objectively bear greater results. Recruitment within the Raven Guard is amongst the slowest within the Loyalist chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, yielding high casualty rates due to their combined training regimes and failure rate of their organ transplantations. The Raven Guard have never truly recovered from their ignominious fall during the Horus Heresy. Spending an inordinate amount of time as members of the chapter's scout company, each batch of recruits are accompanied by several veterans to observe and mentor their progress. Never mobilized at full strength as outlined by the Codex Astartes, the Raven Guard would struggle to muster a force capable of matching the strength of their first founding brethren, recruiting their aspirants solely from their homeworld of Deliverance. The need to transport genetic materials from Holy Terror on a regular basis would also contribute to their slow replenishment of numbers. However, due to the Raven Guard's preference and unmatched skill in stealth, sabotage, and infiltration, their casualties in war would be below the average incurred by other Astartes chapters. Trained by the chapter's Shadow Masters or the Ravenspire, aspirants of the 19th are taught in the methods to move silently, with minimal detection. Despite their objectively bulky armor, the Raven Guard display the uncanny ability of wraith slipping within the labyrinths of the Ravenspire. Packing their armor with earth and rags of fabric, the aspirants learn to muffle the sounds of their armor until they are capable of mastering the secret rites of silence employed by every battle brother of the Raven Guard. Constantly training and understanding the art of wraith slipping, every Astartes of the chapter is required to maintain their understanding of this formidable art, lest they erode their mastery of its techniques. Though not infallible, the recruits will come to understand that such near-perfect camouflage and concealment is the hallmark of any veteran of the chapter. The initial formation of the 19th Legion would be comprised similar to its Unification-era contemporaries. Divided into chapters, each containing battalions, companies, and finally squads, most individual Astartes would identify their service to the Legion by denoting their role within a company instead of their chapter. With the reunion of their Primarch and the Imperium of Man, the 19th would incorporate tank warfare into the Legion, though their use would dwindle with their resultant decimation during the Horus Heresy. Numbering only 4,000 Astartes by the end of the Horus Heresy, the Raven Guard would reorganize the companies into Talons, Falcons, and light vehicle and air support squadrons into Hawks. Fielding many specialist squads and formations, the Raven Guard deployed a preponderance of reconnaissance squads in comparison to their cousin legions, also employing a large contingent of Moritats, Astartes who bore suicidal tactics in their methods of battle and would conduct more assassination and sabotage missions than any other contemporary legion. Though employing librarians during the Great Crusade with the Edict of Nicaea, Corvus Corax would agree to disband his legion's librarius. Reassigned as frontline troops, the librarians of the Legion would never fully recover due to the events of the Istvan V Dropside Massacre, culling the majority of their number. Commanded solely by senior officers originating from Deliverance by the time of the Horus Heresy, Corax would loosely overrule his lieutenants due to his nature of valuing candid and honest counsel. Not willing to be treated alike to his brother Primarchs, Corax would expect his men not to serve him as a serf would to a tyrant. Protected by his loyal Shadow Wardens, the Honor Guard of the Legion, Corax would devise further specialist ranks to be employed within the Legion. Amongst the first company, the Mordaefan would serve as the elite reconnaissance and scouts of the 19th. Nicknamed the Shadow Masters, these members of the Raven Guard will, alike to their Primarch, be able to shadow walk, the ability employed by their Primarch to walk amongst mortals seemingly unnoticed. Wielding chainswords, bolt pistols, sniper rifles, and on rare occasions Volkite armaments, the Mordaefan would communicate using strange whispers known as Stalk Argot. Said battle candle sighs and whispers would be to the untrained ear alike to gusts of wind or environmental sounds. With few surviving past the Istvan V Dropsite Massacre, the Mordaefan would seemingly disappear as their numbers dwindled. The Deliverers would comprise the Legion's dreadnought contingent. Due to their inability to conduct the subtle arts of war employed by the Raven Guard, these dreadnoughts would be deployed only when all attempts at sabotage and stealth would fail. Often sent to distant Crusade fleets and engagements, these units would bear little favour from their Primarch. The Shadow Killers would result from veterans of the Legion succumbing to the intense stress of the battlefield. Afflicted by the so-called sable brand of their eyes becoming pure black in colour, these unfortunate Astartes would seek relief only in causing as many casualties by their hand as possible. Frenzied and lacking all sense of self-preservation, the Shadow Killers would on occasion recover, but more reliably further descend into suicidal rampages. Such units would be seen in other legions of the Astartes, whom would be labelled by Rabute Guilliman as Moritats. Dark Fury assault squads would conduct brutal assassination strikes against their enemies. By no means subtle in their application of violence, the Fury assault squads would attack high-valued targets, whilst the wider Legion waged war. Armed with lightning claws, they would tear their enemies to shreds and deploy Darkwing patterned Storm Eagles and Whisper Cutters to close the distance to their targets. Due to the chapter's doctrines of concealment and espionage, the Raven Guard do not employ embellishments or gaudy designs upon their armor. Encased in jet black armor, best suited to aiding them in their concealment within the shadows, the 19th complied to the outlines of the Codex Astartes with only minor alterations in its overarching guidelines. Despite their proclivity to obfuscate or remove their heraldry during engagements with more canny adversaries, the Raven Guard would diminish their command markings and squad identifiers in the wake of the second founding. As a Codex-compliant chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, the Raven Guard divide their numbers into 10 100-man strong companies. Officers within the chapter would be commanded by the captains, known as Shadow Captains, with each chapter master, following the departure of the Raven Lord, assigned the title of Master of Shadows. Proudly displaying their chapter iconography of the Raven on their left pauldrons, their shoulder plates trim, no matter their rank, shall always remain the purest of black. Their right pauldron displays their squad specialization, such as close support, fire support, veteran, or command staff. Though the 19th's fire support sigil differs from other Codex-compliant chapters by the symbol of an explosive detonation. Their right pauldron's trim denotes their company, with white reserved for the elite first company. Other colors include gold for the second, red for the third, green for the fourth, black for the fifth, bronze for the sixth, purple for the seventh, silver for the eighth, and blue for the ninth. Squads are designated in low Gothic numerals on the left knee plate. Rank is denoted by helmet designs, denoted by skull iconography and color coding. Sergeants bear a simple skull on the crest of their helmet, whilst veteran sergeants retain their skull icon and paint their helmets white. Lieutenants bear a red and white stripe pattern on their helmets and an ornate design on their right pauldron, while Shadow Captains resemble the white skull-adorned helmets of the veteran sergeants, with the addition of an ornate captain design on their right pauldron. Some high-ranking senior officers paint their shoulder plates purest white, and on rarer occasions, pair these with white paint on both of their arms. Yet for every design or signifier of rank, the Raven Guard also employ heavily encoded Auspex signifiers into their armor designs, allowing for their Battle Brothers auto-sensors to identify senior officers during their concealment. Though within these outlinings of heraldry, there also exists a unique signifier for the chapter's elite. The black Ravenclaw symbol adorns the right pauldron with a white background. Reserved for the most venerated and long-serving veterans, this marking denotes Astartes of the chapter, renowned for their guerrilla warfare and versatile command experience. Following the outlined strategies and guidelines of the Codex Astartes, the Raven Guard eschew several tactics outlined by the tome due to their preference for waging war and limited deployable force. Experts of guerrilla warfare, attritional warfare, and coordinated strikes, the Raven Guard target weak points in enemy defenses, and with speed, cripple the enemy by destroying high-valued infrastructure and targets. Unwilling to engage in reckless assaults that could endanger their Astartes, the 19th rely heavily on their scout marines in gathering information during reconnaissance missions. Deployed in small squads, rather than the full might of the chapter, each captain and their companies fight independently from one another. Regardless of the oversight of their chapter master, each Raven Guard company offers aid to Imperial forces as required. Often criticized for their tactical efficacy due to their loose authority for command, the Raven Guard nonetheless exemplify incredible discipline when commanded by their captains. Deploying several rapid maneuver vehicles in combat, such as land speeders, attack bikes, and Thunderhawk gunships, the Raven Guard support these elements with drop pod insertions of dreadnoughts and highly favor aerial assaults via jump packs. An infantry-heavy chapter, their preference for speed and maneuverability precludes their use of heavy armor, such as Predator tanks or Land Raiders, yet some are held in reserve should they be needed. A mix of special forces units and mechanized infantry, the Raven Guard field overwhelming aerial superiority during engagements to enable surgical strikes behind enemy lines. Often armed with lightning claws, Raven Guard kill teams offset their opposition's numerical superiority by targeting their commanders. Conducting many rituals from their homeworld of deliverance, each neophyte of the 19th must embark on a meditative trance to hunt the avians of the world of Kievar. Utilizing wraith slipping, the neophytes must hunt the ravens of Kievar unnoticed before snatching one up and snapping its neck. The skulls of their prey are then worn as totems hung from small chains around their necks or right pauldrons. These Raven Calvaria represent the Astartes warriors' honor, and should they fall in battle, are collected, similar to the ancient Terran dog tags. Those whom recover these totems shall carry them into battle for their fallen brothers until they shall return to Kievar and bury the skull in the soil of their chapter's homeworld. Fallen Raven Guard Astartes are stripped of their armor, weapons, and gene seed to continue their service to the Legion. The bodies of the fallen 19th left for the carrion of battle, a feast for their venerated namesakes. Despite their reverence to their Primarch Corvus Corax, the Raven Guard do not show the same fervor to the Emperor of Mankind, unlike most of their contemporaries. The 19th follow in their Primarch's footsteps, learning from every battle the lessons to be employed to continue the survival of their chapter. Abhorring the tactics of needless shedding of blood akin to the 9th Legion, or the principled yet boisterous blunt force of the 7th, the Raven Guard see the tactics and doctrines of their peers to be unrefined and callous. Their glory would be earned not in the wholesale slaughter of their foes, the rivers of blood slicking from their blades, or the compliance of worlds under their heavy armored boots. Instead, their glory would be in the honor of preserving their brethren, whilst efficiently culling their enemies in methodical and swift engagements. Bearing rivalries, grudges, and even outright contempt for many of their cousin chapters, the Raven Guard set themselves apart as the brooding yet stoic warriors of the Primarch's example. For a blade in the dark is best stayed until the perfect moment to strike presents itself. And should that moment not manifest, all that is required is to retreat, re-strategize, and lie in wait for the next chance to strike. We go where we wilt. We slay who we wilt. Let the Emperor judge the righteousness of our deeds. This has been a tale of the great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Raven Guard exemplify the utility in using tactics deemed unseemly or even cowardly by other chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. For pride is not a virtue deemed worthy of the 19th's concern, no matter the assaults to their honor. Yet in our next transmission of the Legiones Astartes, we shall elucidate the Legion most crestfallen at the altar of pride, the once Knights of Caliban, the Dark Angels.